Hello and welcome to the Free Cheese, episode 493. I'm your Joe Dix, joined by Matt Sellner.
Hello.
Mark Augustiniak.
Hey.
The Free Cheese is a weekly video game podcast about video games brought to you once a week by thefreecheese.com. Season 11 continues this week with Metal Gear Solid for the Game Boy Color. Before we jump in and talk about the game, and of course rank the game, Mark, if you could create an alternative sequel to an old video game and release it on the Game Boy, which video game of, say, the NES or MSX era would you like to see an alternative sequel for?
Alternative sequel. Let's go with. Oh man, I don't know. Crap. I was gonna say Ice Climber, but they don't even have a sequel. Then I was gonna say Kid Icarus, and they have a sequel on the Game Boy. So that feels kind of redundant.
Yeah, but hey, a Game Boy Color alternative to that alternative sequel, right?
I guess you could. Yeah, I'll go with Kid Icarus.
I like Kid Icarus. That's a good answer. Matt, you can't say Metal Gear because that's what we already got. What would you like to see?
I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm going to go to the Super NES era, and I'm going to say Batman Forever.
A sequel to the... Okay. All right. Yeah. I would like to see a Game Boy Color reinterpretation of Simon's Quest.
Okay.
I guess it'd be a little bit, yeah. But yeah, something along those lines. Of course, I'm asking that because we were playing Metal Gear Solid this week for the Game Boy Color, also known as Ghost Babel in other territories, which is an alternative sequel to the MSX original Metal Gear. Metal Gear Solid for the Game Boy Color was developed by Konami Computer Entertainment Japan in partnership with Tosei. It's published by Konami. Released on the Game Boy Color first on April 27th in the year 2000. Continuing the tradition of Metal Gear games releasing in North America ahead of other territories. It's like one of the few Japanese games that did that, or franchises that has done that continually. Or at least back then. If you look at the back of the box, it reads, early 21st century, an incident that rocks the U.S. government takes place. The classified weapon and nuclear launching bipedal tank, Metal Gear, has fallen into the hands of terrorists. 7 years after the fiasco at Outer Heaven involving the original Metal Gear, the U.S. government calls in Solid Snake to neutralize the terrorist threat. You must use stealth tactics and undercover espionage to defeat the hostile empire. The fate of the world lies in your hands. You get it because you're holding it?
I see what you did there.
Yeah. I try. Matt, I've got 2 questions to start off our conversation here. Why did you choose this video game?
I think you're going to see a theme from me this year where I want to do some follow-ups to some of the games from last year, but in weird and different ways that we don't typically think of. And it was kind of fun to reveal this to you as Metal Gear Solid. Pause for like 1 second and then say for the Game Boy Color. I think that worked out pretty good.
It was a good fake out.
This is probably one of the first Metal Gear games I play, if not the first, because I own this. Despite it being rare, evidently, I did not know that. So, like, going into this year or this season. But yeah, no, I own this. I remember enjoying it. Besides one specific part, that specific part still haunts me today. Mm-hmm. And I'm just a fan of the series. I was trying to think of another way instead of doing a numbered entry, another way to get it in here. I thought this was a unique take on it.
I guess also, so this is now 2 for 2 from Matt. Game Boy submissions back to back. Why Game Boy month over month?
I don't know about why over month. I think that's just how I struck out the schedule.
Well, yes, but But why do you think you were drawn to Game Boy games?
I think just I still wanted to kind of hit some games that maybe make up me in the past or whatever, and Game Boy was one I did not really explore last year. So you might have some more Game Boy games for me upcoming this year. But yeah, no, this was kind of perfect. It was kind of checked all those boxes, like the two I just said, like staying in Metal Gear, but a different take than a numbered entry, which at the end of the day, they're very similar in gameplay until you get to like 4 and 5. It's something I played in my past, and then yeah, it's just it's a game. I forgot I said 3 things, and now I'm forgetting what the third one is. But anyway, yeah, it's Metal Gear, and it's only Game Boy. It was something different, and I played it.
Mark, did you ever play? I think this was a first for you and I both. Metal Gear Solid on Game Boy, right? This time around.
Yes.
Were there other games that you maybe had enjoyed the console version of that you picked up a Game Boy variant for that you can remember?
I mean, outside of Zelda, I'm not.
I guess even those, right? Yeah, those are pretty, and they remain faithful, I think, to the core of what Zelda does, as Metal Gear does.
Yeah. I think the closest translation would probably be Oracle of Seasons. Weirdly enough, to the original Zelda on NES, I think because they share a lot of similar bosses.
Mm-hmm.
So it's cool to kind of see them revamped and just handled a little differently. But the rest of the game is entirely different for sure.
You mentioned bosses, and I think that's a key component of, I think, Metal Gear in general, but also of this game. The one thing that stood out to me, I mean, one, I was unfamiliar with the 4, well, besides Metal Gear, but the 4 kind of boss characters you fight along the way in the stages. I imagine they come up in other Metal Gears at some point, no?
No.
Huh.
This is like dedicated non-canon. But is it non-canon? So that's where it gets weird. Yeah, it's because they're non-canon, but is it still canon to the timeline up into Operation Intrude? Because everything, technically, 3, 5, Peace Walker, all that takes place before Operation Intrude, so it gets real weird.
I didn't realize that. Yeah, the boss fights in this, I think, stand out as kind of those milestones to hit, right? Like they're good, obvious chapter markers, I suppose you could call them, or I don't know. They're just these sort of milestones within the game that are like, okay, you know from the beginning or pretty early on that you have 4 bosses to fight, and I feel like every time you knock one of them out, it's like, okay, that's another step towards the next phase of this game. The game kind of starts off well ahead of that. You are or separate from that. It's not just about the boss fights. And even the boss fights themselves, I think they're all unique. I kind of want to hone in on each of them individually in a bit, but it's not like you get to a stage and it's just a boss fight. Like you work your way through a stage or a series of backtracking or things like that, and then you end up fighting the boss. But early on, you are doing Metal Gear stuff. I mean, you're sneaking through an area, you're collecting key cards to get through doors, and
knocking on walls
to scare people. Yeah, I mean, all of it. Did that, Matt, do you feel like this game accurately depicts that part of Metal Gear for you?
I mean, yeah, if you think of most of the Solid games, I think 5 is the weird one, but if you actually think about it, there are like 4 boss fights in that game. But like, you think of there's always like this enemy squad that has taken over an area or hijacked it for one reason or another. Or at least you think it's one reason or another, and it turns out to be something completely different by the end of the game. But there's always that squad that has these rogue agents that have these special abilities, and this game takes that formula to, I'm not going to say to the next level, but it takes that formula like it has in other games, both before it and after it, and goes along with it. I think at a decent for what that platform is, I think it does a decent job for it with it.
And as a sequel to the MSX game, which I think the NES game is the same, they ported that to NES from MSX, but I might be wrong on that. I can't remember.
It's like, what's that, Snake's Revenge or something like that? It's a little bit different, I think, story beats involved with it. That's considered non-canon as well.
Okay. But gameplay-wise, these are all relatively the same, right?
Yeah, I've never played myself. I've seen them play through or whatever, but I've never played the MSX ones. But it seems pretty identical. I think like the MSX ones, you can't like knock on walls. That's something they took from Solid. Once it got us 3D, once the series went 3D, couple things like that. But this is pretty faithful to those older games.
I have a few thoughts, and I'm sure Mark does too, about playing this whole stop today from... Whole stop's probably not the right term I want to use there. I don't know what I'm saying, but about playing this for the first time in 2023. But Matt, do you feel like this still holds up from what you remember it back then? Were there any gameplay moments that you were frustrated or...
The boxes and the colors and the conveyor belts, for sure. Yeah. It's probably the worst part of this game. Is all the backtracking and the second guessing is that part. But sometimes it's tough when you kind of wander from one screen to the next, and there's like an enemy like right there, and you don't know where they're at, especially if they're moving around a little bit. Because I don't think the screen's reset. Now I can't remember. I can't remember the enemy placement resets if you leave the screen or not. You're shaking your head no. Okay. So like sometimes after an alert you don't know where they're at and you walk right into them. There's some frustrating things like that, but I think it's the same frustrations that I would have encountered or I have seen in other playthroughs of those MSX games. Which is why I think like this is actually pretty faithful in terms of gameplay to those, whether you like those games or not.
No, I was impressed. I've only played them, in fits and starts, just poking around as I've explored random moments of the MSX library. But from what I'd played of those, the gameplay in this was, relatively the same. And I did feel like this was really competent for a Game Boy game. The Game Boy is a fascinating platform for me to look at, I think, more and more lately because of how long it lasted. And I know the Game Boy Color is technically, there's a separate library, but it is kind of an extension of the original. And like, when you really look at that, the Game Boy Advance launched in 2001, but Game Boy Color games were being published like up through 03, 04 maybe. I could be wrong, but either way, it was from 1989 up until then. And like, it ranges everywhere from like really crappy puzzle games that are single screen, programmed poorly, whatever may be the case, to ones that aren't. I mean, that's not that all puzzle games. There's plenty that are really, really fun
Tetris.
To play. Sure, exactly. Amazing Penguin, shout out. Like there's a lot of good stuff on that platform, but then like something like this where it's like a console style experience on a Game Boy or on that platform is, I think really impressive overall. That is to say, I did not fully enjoy my entire time with it. For me, I would say some of the stages, and even prior to the box debacle, because that is a stage, there were just moments where I felt lost and turned around, and I couldn't quite find my sense of direction in the game. I would get the key card and I just didn't know where to go, and I just felt like I was wandering in the same areas. And then, no, you know what? Now that when you leave a screen, the people do reset. Now that I think about it, because that was a frustrating moment. Maybe I was wrong. Do you remember, Mark?
It depends on if you're being chased or not.
I think
if you're being chased, that's when it gets all scrambled.
Yeah.
I think if you mess up timing and you're not alert, maybe
depending
that's
on
why
the
I'm like
map. There are certain maps where, like, if you're being chased and you cross through a door, it will cancel the fact that you're being chased. But certain maps, like just changing screens doesn't necessarily mean you lose them. But yeah, I found that I was just kind of getting lost a good amount of time, or of the time. The box puzzle was definitely a trying moment where I just thank you GameFAQs.com. As long as you still exist, I will still continue to visit and utilize your resources. But yeah, overall though, it was, I think, an enjoyable experience. I liked how they integrated the gadgets from Metal Gear into this game. I liked how you were able to acquire things along the way, use them like you would in any of the other Metal Gear games.
Well, you can't smoke, you fog.
Okay, fair. But it felt like a Metal Gear game in that regard. Down to the cinematics, I think that was honestly my favorite part, was seeing all of the character designs in the Game Boy art style.
I was hoping someone would bring that up, because I think you think Metal Gear, especially Solid, you think like these big cinematic moments, and I think like this game, maybe it's me emulating it with a backstream light, but I think this looks really good still, like for Game Boy. But yeah, no, I think it tells a good story. Like, it delivers some decent like cinematography. I do like Snake's bandana waving as he runs through the screens. I thought that was like really good animation. I'm glad you brought that up, at the story.
I learned that the polygon artist for Metal Gear Solid 1 was the person responsible for the sprite work in this game. And was like painstakingly wanted to make sure that this looked good and didn't want it to be like dumb looking or anything like that.
I like that a lot.
And I think from a technical standpoint, this is a very impressive Game Boy Color game. You can see its ambition. I think the trade-off is that it's on a Game Boy in the sense that you really have to sit through dialogue, like 3 lines at a time. Like, that part hurts. But the rest of it, like I didn't hate looking at it. Like, I love that they kept the same art, similar to like all the concept art and cover arts within the cutscenes. I loved, all those nods and everything.
To be fair though about the codecs, because it is a Game Boy Color game, you don't sometimes get stuck in 20 to 30 minute codec conversations like you would in a console.
I kind of do.
Yeah, there are some.
There are some that go on, but
did you sit through the intro of this game?
I mean, that's the intro. You're not in you're not in like the last area of Metal Gear Solid 2. Yeah. Talking to
true. It could be worse for sure.
45 minutes, it feels like.
It will say rough just to like read 5 words and then it has to reset.
Yeah.
Metal Gear Solid 2 was the last one I played, which noticeably was missing Mei Ling, so I was very happy to have Mei Ling back this time around. I loved saving the game and just getting little proverbs or advice or little things like that thrown at me. It's weird. I think like if you two or you the listener view our site page for this and see my review, like my visual score for this is pretty low, which is kind of counterintuitive to how I feel about it, because I really like the way the characters look. I like the character animations, like Mark pointed out. I think the enemy designs are really the boss designs are very cool. Everybody else is sort of generic, but like the actual like cool close up like cutscene boss fight stuff or those characters, they're really cool looking. But I do feel like a lot of the stages blended together, a lot of areas within the stages blended together. It's that thing I talked about before where I just felt like I was kind of just looping in the same areas and getting lost from time to time. That part felt a little flat to me. But yeah, overall, I thought this was an enjoyable game. I liked that each boss fight was different enough. I don't know if we want to jump into those things now, but I liked that like you had to take a different approach. You had to take things that you'd learned or tools that you'd acquired just recently and apply them directly into a boss fight. They very easily could have just had you run in and shoot the boss, but they didn't.
Yeah, I think I'm allowed to say that Metal Gear Solid is probably known for many of its boss battles, and I think that is a key staple in all these games is like unique boss fights that have specific mechanics that, you know, they're not like, I wouldn't never say they're super difficult, but they make you think about your environment or the tools you have, or you know, think like you said, things you've learned in the past. And you know, I don't think you get the full of that in this game because of the platform and some of its limitations compared to a 3D environment. But you know, they're there. Like, so, you know, you have to use thermal goggles in the one. You have to use I think like dodge and use grenades in the other ones. Stinger missiles for it's like it. You know, it makes you think. But I think they're playing through everything. I think I've seen more clever things, even in the MSX games. But now I'm struggling to think of a more clever boss fight in the MSX games besides maybe Big Boss in the second Metal Gear game. But yeah, I thought, you know, they were interesting enough. They were definitely better than the regular enemy encounters and whatever. And it felt big too, I think, as well, which is, I think, important in this series.
Did you have a favorite boss fight in this, Mark?
I was gonna say, was it Pyro Bison? But that one wasn't as interesting though. Even though, like, I feel like Pyro Bison is more of my personality type in games, but boss fight wise, I think the what's the name? Isn't like Owl something?
Marionette Owl.
Marionette Owl. Like, struggling, but I also enjoyed that design.
Yeah, what I have written down is the note while I was playing was Owl is a pretty cool fight, but Hawk was cooler just lobbing grenades. I feel like that. Like, I felt like I liked Owl for the approach that he had. The dolls, like if you didn't have the right,
yeah,
that one you needed thermal or you needed night vision to actually see.
I can't remember.
I think it was
thermal.
Vision. Yeah, you needed night vision.
Thermal.
Thermal would show you three figures, but I think night vision would show you who each one was, so that you could like effectively, you know. I might be wrong about that.
Wrong. I thought I thought night vision he flashed you. That's why you couldn't use it.
He does.
Yeah, like you would have to alternate. It was a whole.
I think I thought that wrong. I think you used thermal and just fucking sucked it up.
You can use thermal because the night vision goggles you have to go out of your way to find. But because I got lost so frequently, I found them because I don't think you need them for that.
I definitely have both.
Right.
I definitely have both.
They probably. I think thermal was probably the intended way, and then night is like for those ones who like to go a little further, go a little extra. And they're like, well, and it's cool that they were able to still combat that. Like, oh, you think you're clever because you got this.
Yeah, here's a flash of the screen.
Yeah, it's a good concept.
Yeah. This was the last 2D Metal Gear game. Do you think that it effectively, you know, leaves its legacy or leaves its mark on the Metal Gear 2D legacy?
I think gameplay wise, it is probably the best playing of the 2D ones, just because it took some concepts from Solid. And I think if it, as any sequel does, or usually does, it learns from itself and corrects some mistakes. But as far as legacy, I think this is like a forgotten hidden gem, because story's so big in Metal Gear, and this is one of the non-canon ones. And when you have like 8 entries in the core series that are timelines, and you have different varieties of gameplay throughout the years and different consoles it's been on, I think when you're non-canon in a series like this, you just, or that gem, that hidden gem, that's forgotten about.
I will say that the DNA of this, though, is carried on through Boktai, because this was the stepping stone to that series.
How do you figure?
Well, like, the way that, like, the game is designed, and, like, the fact that they were working on Game Boy, like, that experience led to them, like, working on Boktai, like, almost immediately after.
Oh, I like that.
And which makes sense, because Django plays pretty similar to Snake, where, like, you can sneak around, you can scale walls, you can still knock on the wall to attract monsters to come to you. Like, it has a very Metal Gear layer to it, and I'm pretty sure that even Snake is also a cameo in one of the games, and I think even Kojima himself might be a cameo. I can't remember.
It wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, but yeah, a lot of that DNA from this is in that series.
Fun fact for the listeners: Boktai on my long short list for games for this year in season 11.
You're going to say that every fucking week, dude.
That's true. I could.
Those are cool games, though.
I legitimately, I had that on. That was one of the first games I actually put on the list for season 11, until I started looking at prices for getting the original cart, because I felt like if we were going to do that, we should all do it properly. And there's emulators now, and most emulators for GBA specifically have designed a brightness meter that you can adjust for that one game. But I felt like if we were going to do it.
Yeah, for me, I would need like a UV light or something, because I work at night. I sleep in it. I am a vampire, so
yeah, that it wouldn't have.
That would be a challenge.
What else on this game stands out that you either took note of that you wanted to talk about, or is there anything we haven't covered yet?
So you were saying about your problems with the game. I think one of mine, it has its twists and turns, right? There's the betrayals, and of course, someone in your fucking codec who's been in your ear the entire game ends up betraying you or whatever. Typical fucking Metal Gear stuff. It should have been, if you've played Metal Gear, like all of them, right, and he announced who he was, you should have fucking known he was corrupt. But yeah, anyway, regardless. I just felt like it was a little anticlimactic compared to the rest of the series. And it makes me wonder, because you do have the name and scheme Ghost Babel in Japan, but this is still called Metal Gear Solid, just Metal Gear Solid in Europe and America. And I wonder, like, maybe this would have been a little bit more impactful if it was a demake of MGS. And I think it would have been different enough, because I think it would have been iconic too, because the first 3D game back down to 2D. And I think you can still do the clever things that Solid does in different ways in a demake. And it made me start wondering, like, could they have gone down that route, and would it have been more impactful? Would have been more fun to play, more interesting? And then, the fact I'm asking myself that, it's like, well, did I really like this game or not? I don't know. Like, I think I did. I think I enjoyed my time with it. But it left me wanting more in its product, which I honestly I don't think I can say about any other Metal Gear Solid or I can't say Metal Gear, any of the Metal Gear Solid games I've played.
Counter question. How would you have done the Psycho Mantis fight?
Fucking buy have a link cable and a second Game Boy, you know?
Oh my god, could you imagine? You have to buy 2 copies of the game and another game.
Yeah, fuck it.
I think the link cable
hook it up.
Couldn't you use the link cable in this? There is like a versus.
There is 2-player,
yes.
Yeah.
So
actually they probably would have done if they went full stupid with that, you probably had to like plug into the Super Game Boy.
I could see something like that being a thing. You couldn't make it impossible for people to do it without, right? Like you'd need to be able to do something with the hardware.
But like you have no memory of other games either.
Yeah. I don't know.
It's not mandatory for that part, but
the memory thing. I mean, sure. There's going to be no way you can do the memory thing, but I wonder if like there's something dumb in the pause menu that you can invert the controls, so like A is B and B is A, and like you have it messes with your mind as well, but you fight through it to confuse him. There's something
it would
dumb
need
like
to
that.
be...
I mean, and remember, this is the same game that has literally a character tells you, "Oh, look on the back of the box for a codec."
Mm-hmm.
So I think you can hide a option like that in the pause menu and get away with it.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, that would have been interesting.
I mean, he could have just mentioned like the 3 best-selling Game Boy games at the time, right? Like,
yeah, like it just mentions the game you're playing. You were a fan of this game. Yeah, figured me out.
Yeah, so that was my biggest takeaway was I'm a little underwhelmed.
Mark, anything lingering for you with this one?
So I'm not too savvy with Metal Gear as a franchise. I haven't really played a lot of those games. So I guess I come from a very outside perspective on this. But I am familiar enough with the series to know what's what. Like, I'm not completely blind to all of it, you know, like how they're played, characters, lore, and that sort of thing. I mean, obviously, for a game like this on a system like this, it's going to be hard to compete with its other mainline games, right? So, like, I think it's destined to be probably one of the flattest in the series, but I think as a Game Boy Color game, I think it's pretty up there. Just as an overall impressive feat to even exist the way that it does. And this didn't really come to light to me until around the time of the most recent Nintendo Direct, where they showed Alone in the Dark was available for Game Boy Color, and seeing that being played and translated into a Game Boy Color game, it's interesting. I can see how it could be jarring, but I was impressed by how they handled that. So I didn't realize how experimental the Game Boy Color was with its like exclusive games. And I think this definitely deserves to be mentioned every time somebody talks about a Game Boy Color. But that said, I love stealth games, and I'm awful at them at the same time. And I'm glad that this one was simple enough for me to manage, but yet I still had my struggles here and there to where it's like, all right, you just get to a point where it's no more sneaking, you're just running and sucker punching and hoping that like the next screen you get to is the end of the stage and just resets everything.
Yeah, like hopefully I get to the elevator or I guess the elevator lock. Sorry, hopefully you get to the stairs. Like, why the stair screen is a clear screen is beyond me, but...
And the game could work on its bedside manners. I think this took a page from Capcom, where they grade you harshly.
Oh my god. Yeah,
you are never good enough. Like, if this game is your parent, you're never good enough in their eyes, no matter what.
Yeah, I forgot about the grading.
And of course, I never really put it together until now for some reason. I don't know why I took this game to do it, but Metal Gear bosses have very similar names to, I feel like, to Mega Man X bosses, and you could probably do a game and test people to see which came from what, because Pyro Bison definitely sounds like a Mega Man X boss.
Yeah, or a Street Fighter character, or someone's Sonic fanfiction.
Well, then it would be Pyro the Bison.
Oh,
but yes.
Yeah,
yes, you're not far off. You just gotta add the between everything.
Yeah.
Oh, dude, they take that out. So 2 doesn't even include the. I don't think on any of them. I think it's Vorchin, Fat Man. Yeah, and then 3 has the in front of everything, so it's the whatever.
Okay.
Except for Volgin, he's the exception, but he's the leader, so he's allowed an exception.
He sets the rules, yeah.
That was definitely not important, but I thought that was kind of funny pacing wise, where like you're already halfway through defeating these bosses, and then they introduce you to the whole gang after like killing 2 of them. And you're like,
yeah,
okay, sure.
Yeah, and it also does the Metal Gear thing where as they're like you kill them, but man, it takes them forever to die because they get out their whole life story to you in time, which again, very Metal Gear. 4 is
so that you finally feel
the
bad
worst
about them
offender
dying.
of it.
Yeah,
4 is by far the worst offender. Yeah, you get it takes it's Metal Gear. That's the formula.
I think it's time we rank this Metal Gear against another Metal Gear and the rest of our list. If you want to follow along the list, thefreecheese.com/thelist is our full list of 50, soon to be 51 video games. Can you believe it?
Mm-mm.
I'm going to dive right in because I know Matt won't.
I was actually going to, but all right.
What? Do it. I can't. No, I can't sacrifice.
Well, I was going to give
what you did.
I was going to give you a high ceiling and a low floor.
Oh, okay, I've got a direct number, so let's see where your ceiling and floor are.
All right, my ceiling is there's no way in hell this is better than Metal Gear Solid 2. So
okay, which is currently 21 on our list for the listeners not viewing.
Right. And then there is no way this is worse than the Game Boy game we played last month, WWF Betrayal,
which is 38 on our list.
Told you. That's
well.
Got you
I have
range.
great news for you because the number, my gut feeling number, is between your floor and ceiling.
Perfect.
Mark, how about you?
Man, I think it's closer to the floor than the ceiling.
I agree.
All right.
It might be just above the floor.
That's where I'm thinking.
Okay, well, hold on. I feel like we can walk it down a little bit, but my gut, looking at this list, is the new 27. Just below Mass Effect 2, just above X-Men 2 Clone Wars.
I don't know.
Having said that, I remember X-Men 2 Clone Wars a bit more. I think I do like X-Men 2 better than this. And as we work our way down...
I personally like X-Men 2 as well.
I think I like Bomberman 93 better than this.
I do as well.
Star Fox Assault better than this?
I do.
Probably.
Minish Cap better than this?
I do.
Yeah.
Valis 3 better than this?
Shit.
Yeah,
it's right around here. But here's the thing, I see Valis 3, Perfect Dark, and Psyops in this group of 32, 33, and 34.
Sure.
And there are those are the games where there was something there.
Yeah.
The whole package isn't great, but they do one thing, at least one thing, very good. Like Valis is like that that fucking the comic book, or not comic, but like the Sunday morning or Saturday morning cartoon.
Yeah.
Perfect Dark, probably multiplayer, and it was pretty experimental with a single player at the time.
Yeah.
PsyOps is a fun testing, fun concept, just too long and frustrating at times. But then you get the ESPN NFL football, and it's like, that is like one of the best football games, simulation based, period, still today. I have problems putting this above that.
I'm similar, but with Devil's Crush.
Oh man, we're back to the old Devil's Crush again.
Yep.
And then that's where, so like if we're not putting it between ESPN and Peggle, then like, yeah, all right, I'd rather pick up Devil's Crush and play a few games of that than probably play this again.
Oh, you don't want to do a second playthrough for the knockoff radio drama that you can get?
They released a CD of that. That's okay. I can find it somewhere else.
On Kojima's other podcast.
Yeah, I do like Devil's Crush more than this, and I like Peggle more than this, and I like ESPN football more than this. I hate that it's right above last month's game, but I guess this isn't the first time we've done that.
I think so. I think that will create a new sandwich as time goes on.
Yeah,
there is quite the difference, I think, there.
All right, do we like that? Right above WWF Betrayal and below Devil's Crush?
That's where I've been this whole time. So I'm cool with it.
That was like my area. I mean, definitely not below Betrayal, and I had problems going above football.
I mean, we've done that before, haven't we? Where we just like played 2 games in a row and they were just right next to each other.
I mean, the first and second week, for sure.
No, we had that. There were
like last year.
I'm sure. Yeah.
Shoot. Hey, look. Minish Cap and Valis 3 were an episode apart, and they're still 31 and 32. Top Gear Rally and Chameleon Twist 2 are one over the other. They were 472 and 471. It's definitely happened.
Yeah.
Well, there you have it. Metal Gear Solid for the Game Boy Color. Is that the end of Kojima for Season 11? Stay tuned for our March announcements and see what might be coming. Until then, check out the list over at thefreecheese.com/thelist. The cool thing about the list, dear listener, is that if you've perhaps missed an episode and you're unsure of which video games we've talked about and reviewed, you can look there for an easy-to-reference list of everything, and then quickly click on one of the episode numbers to jump right to the game that we talked about, listen to the episode, leave a comment, send the episode to your friends, your coworkers, or someone you meet at McDonald's because you're there and you like talking about Game Boy games with them. Come back next week. You can talk about Sonic Frontiers with us as we talk and rank and discuss one of the best video games of 2022? I don't know. We'll find out next week. Until then, thank you, Mark. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, listener, for listening. See you next week.